bill today, but we want to bring you updates and breaking news into our newsroom right now. We are talking about the Diddy trial. This is a trial against Sean Diddy Combs. The verdict is in his trafficking case. It was a mixed verdict from the jury. Combs was spared of the most serious charge, and that charge carried a sentence of life in prison. But we want to start with the ruling here. He was found not guilty of racketeering, not guilty on count 2 and 4, which were the sex trafficking charges, but he was found guilty on counts 3 and 5. Those were the transportation for the purposes of prostitution charges. So you're looking right now at a podium right outside the courthouse, right there. We expect lawyers for Combs to give a presser there any moment now.
A lot of people think that Diddy might be getting off because they don't know the letter of the law. The prosecution, let's start with them. They did a great job. They did a great job in explaining what sex trafficking, the 11 charges. The 11 charges, well, it's 4 or 5 charges, but they got different, like sex trafficking, then paying a prostitution. Under sex trafficking, they might have paying a prostitute, transporting prostitution. They got different checkpoints and that the juror's going to have to go through to check off whether this guy is guilty of the things they saying. The RICO law, they have different statutes of the RICO law that the prosecution had to prove, as well as racketeering. You know what I'm saying? All this started by what I said, the character of this gentleman.
Now, what Gene is saying is that he never made up stories or tried to make money like these other YouTubers and stuff to, just talking about a person to down them because he was around them. He's saying all this stuff was true. He was just talking about the character of a person. That's it.
The character of Puff, what he has done over the years to people, had nothing to do with Gene Deal.
Tell us more about the ruling, and I know you're standing outside. Tell us about the reaction, too, that you got once that verdict officially came in.
This is a victory for Sean Combs and his family. Sean Combs put his hands up to the sky. He had his hands sort of clasped as though he was praying, according to those who were inside the courtroom, and kneeled down. He was very emotional. There was cheering inside of the courtroom once this verdict was read. The issue now is whether or not Sean Combs will be able to go home until sentencing. That is being worked out as we speak. The judge adjourned and said that they would be back at about 1 o'clock this afternoon Eastern time to figure out whether or not the sentencing would start sooner, or whether or not he will have an opportunity to go home until their sentencing for the 2 counts that he was convicted of, the Mann Act. Now, that involved star witness Cassie Ventura, someone that dated Combs for the 11 years. And then you had Jane. He was also found guilty on that Mann Act. That was also someone that he dated from 2021 to about 2024. But the family just left. I believe it was 6 of his 7 children that were in 2 sprinters. You see one right here behind me. We're not sure. Looks like this one is leaving. But I can tell you from even where I was standing, I could see that the children of Sean Combs had a smile on their face. They took their time getting into that sprinter. Normally, they are in, they are out, they do not make eye contact, they have no comment. But today is different.
So now, the prosecution went in there. They explained everything that Puff did. Diddy, as y'all know him as. Everything he did as far as the drug trafficking, having people bring him drugs, having people kidnapped, taken from their home, sitting up for hours in warehouses being given polygraph tests, beating of women, holding women over balconies,
The defense framed the case as a consensual encounters, not a criminal RICO enterprise, and highlighted the high threshold for trafficking convictions. The jury deliberated over 3 days. Combs now awaits sentencing and remains jailed pending bond agreements. So, you know, they had everything, like Gene just said. Listen to him. They had everything to catch him up. He had guns, he had drugs, he had everything a criminal could have.
They prove that he bribed witnesses, tried to give certain people money. I guess it's not a bribery because there was no criminal charges, brought up prior to that. That's what the defense tried to say. But offering people money, selling lawsuits, things that he wasn't supposed to be guilty of, but he quick to settle them, quick to offer people money. The prosecution did that whole thing. They went through that whole gambit. Ain't nobody paying nobody no money if they ain't guilty of nothing.
And that's the truth. You'll never pay that type of money to nobody. Nobody. I mean, for instance, look at Tyler Perry. He had all these accusers, over the years. And when you pay out, they use that against you, because it's kind of a form of that you're guilty. And then y'all got to remember, Diddy came and said, I'm sorry. And then he settled. So Gene is saying what it say, what it do.
Not him. It was a lot of things that the prosecution did their job into showing us. Not only this guy's not a good guy, this guy behavior is detrimental to society.
Now that's deep, and he let it be known. That's a person that know him personally, And it ain't like he gonna gain something for knocking him down, but he just trying to warn others, don't get caught up in the web.
And it's different because their father is not facing up to life in prison. He's still facing significant time, a maximum of up to 20 years, because each count of the Mann Act has a maximum of 10 years. And the government saying they plan to pursue the maximum. But it is definitely something that we saw in that courtroom. Based on those who were in there, we could see that there was a weight lifted off of Sean Combs because he was facing very, very serious allegations and crimes, but again, only found guilty on 2 of those counts. The Mann Act, that is the transportation to engage in prostitution.
We could see that. We could see that because we know other things that he has said and done that didn't even make it to the trial. I look back on all the original charges. They could have went at him a whole lot of different ways. And I was wondering why they only did 4 or 5 charges. Why they didn't get into tax evasion? Why they didn't get into, it's a lot of things that they could have got into, but they didn't get into that, brother. And I'm wondering why. I'm wondering, is it because he got friends in high places still? That's a possibility. We wouldn't be here with the federal government if he never had made those people mad, bro. The federal government been knowing about Diddy for a long time. For a long time. You got people coming out saying now, I've seen Suge on your program, said he was a federal agent. I've been told people that. That I know him and Kirk Burrows was taking paperwork down to the federal government. I been knew he was going to D.C. I did a show on that. It's a lot of things that's going on here. There's a lot of things that you see. Even when people thought that the prosecution was letting up by having the predicate acts and the predicate charges dropped, and people was going in, he getting off, he getting off. No, they did that to make the case more better for the jury.
And Jerika, just yesterday, we know the jury, they came back with a partial verdict and they were going to continue deliberating this morning. It seems very quickly into that deliberation process, they came up with their final verdict, right?
That's right. And, you know, one of my colleagues, Elaine Quijano, said there's a lot of social science behind people being a little bit sharper in the morning and being more decisive. And I never thought about that, but it makes sense when you're trying to analyze, you know, why not go later yesterday at the end of the day if you only had an hour or less of deliberating before you needed to make that decision. And I think many of us were wondering if, because that racketeering conspiracy charge, which was very broad and very complex, a lot of legal scholars would describe it that way, especially considering a case like this that had to do with a criminal enterprise, a group being formed, being led by Sean Combs for his sexual desires. But it was, you know, you never know what the jurors are thinking, and that's why you have to wait for the results. So we could have said, well, maybe it means this or maybe it means that. I have to be honest, I think a lot of people are a bit shocked by the outcome. Some saying that they thought, a number of people I spoke to thought for sure he might be found guilty of sex trafficking on Cassie Ventura. But again, that is not what the jurors found. 8 men and 4 women who listened to 34 witnesses over the course of 7 weeks, making that decision this morning after deliberating for less than an hour on this Wednesday morning.
When they look at it, and it doesn't give him an opportunity, it may give him an opportunity, but it lessens his opportunity for appeals when they drop the attempted arson, attempted kidnapping, attempted this, that, and the third. When they drop those charges and say, no, he did do it, it makes it easier for the jury to read and make a decision on it. Instead of having to say, oh, well, they got attempt here, and then they got he did it here. Did he attempt it or did he do it? You understand? The jury don't have to go through stuff like that, brother. You understand? So now, the prosecution, what they did was they laid out everything this whole past week. And they put it into play. And here we go. We got the defense. The defense who did Diddy dirty. He paid them all that money for them to tell him, literally just say, okay, Cassie got $20 million out the deal. She's not a victim. These people came back to work because they loved them. What they didn't understand is that you had a guy that was in power, and he wasn't really a music mogul no more. He was selling alcohol. He was marketing. What music he sold in the last 10 years that would make him a multi-millionaire?
Yes, and what's next for Combs here? I know obviously this verdict is a victory for him and his team, but there's a chance that he is going to spend time in prison. So what's next for him, and how does this affect his legacy?
Well, you know, it will be interesting to see if he will. He didn't have a previous record, if you will. I believe the minimum is It could be probation on a Mann Act. So you're going to have to look at statutes. There's time served since he's been in the MDC since September of 2024. So I don't know what kind of time he is facing, but I think this is the best possible outcome that the defense could have asked for. Obviously, I'm sure they would have thought maybe not guilty on all of the counts, but they realized the serious nature of what their client was facing. The next step really is this 1 o'clock hearing where the judge will determine whether or not Sean Combs gets to go home free until his official sentencing, or whether they'll make that determination today.